I am so excited today to bring you this guide on the Demolitionist. The Demolitionist has a hand size of 9, so some problems there around exhausting, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you maximize your effectiveness because there's so much complexity in the cards of the Demolitionist around you being adjacent to obstacles and monsters being adjacent to obstacles and walls and that sort of thing. So I'm really going to dive deep into how to make sure that each time you've got a condition on a card that you're able to fulfill that condition. And if you can do some really good work with the Demolitionist. We're also really going to focus on enemy movement and how it's affected by our actions, like placing traps, like pushing, pathing around objectives, all kinds of good stuff like that, so that you can make sure the monsters are always in the right place at the right time. And also, we've got a couple of really good friends that are going to really help us out in our journey, and so we'll talk about them as well. And also, original Gloomhaven players, don't forget that Jaws of the Lion rules actually differ quite substantially in some ways, so make sure that when you're playing Jaws of the Lion, if you're an experienced Gloomhaven player, that you really take a good look through that rule book, because there's definitely going to be some things that make you go, oh, whoa, that is way different. All right, let's go next to starting cards. Windup. At one point in an earlier video, I think I called this card the worst card ever, but that is, pretty hyperbolic. It can be useful in some situations, but generally I don't like delaying damage because you're leaving monsters alive. However, this card in the right situation can be semi-useful. You can use it, after you've cleared a room to set up for the next room, especially if you're in a scenario that has a bunch of shielded enemies. And also the bottom move, doubling a move ability, can combo well with some things. One of those is Explosive Blitz to give you a ton of movement to get where you need to go. And so it can be useful in some situations, but I find myself leaving this card home most of the time. Piston Punch. Attack 2, push 2 is a bit weak. However, if you add fire, it's attack 3, push 3, and that becomes much more useful for pushing monsters into traps. And also, you can effectively stun a melee enemy if it has low move and you push it out of range where it can't get back to you by moving that turn. So push 3 can definitely do that on some slower melee enemies. And then the bottom, it's a bit of a pain because you've got to be adjacent to a monster first, because you're not, most of the time you're not going to be able to move with a top move. And so you've got to be adjacent. And so what I like to do is I like to go late one turn and move in, attack, and then use a fast card with this, and you can stun somebody that way, and it's much easier to pull off, and you're not going to get yourself in a bunch of hot water. The poison on the bottom is useful if you've got earth. It's not amazing, it's kind of just a very small bonus, but if you've got something like 1-2 punch, poisoning an enemy is going to turn that attack into 5, and so it can definitely be useful for comboing with something like that. Crushing Weight is a very solid card for us at level 1. It's going to do 5 damage, which is basically our highest attack that's non-loss at level 1. And so if you can get them next to a wall, it's very good. I usually actually use the move more often. I like pushing enemies against a wall and then moving quickly the next turn to move up. And then the bottom is suffer 2 damage instead of add 2 damage. So if you're facing shielded enemies, definitely take advantage of that, because the shields aren't going to take effect on the suffer damage. Explosive Blitz. The top is a good utility card because range 4 is going to help you attack enemies that you just can't hit with your melee. So sometimes you are going to use it for that, and definitely throughout the scenario you're going to use it for that to create fire for some of your other abilities. And at initiative 19, it's a pretty solid initiative for us. And then the bottom though is a really amazing card in the right circumstances. First, you're going to need to add some movement to this most of the time to make it effective. If you're original Gloomhaven, you can add some boots to this or something like that, or you can potentially use the bottom of Windup and do a big move, because in Gloomhaven you can't see what's on the other side of the door. So having a big move really helps you get in there and position correctly. And then when you're playing in Jaws of the Lion with this, just take a look at the next room and math out if your current move, like the move 3 that's on the card, maybe with the boots to add +1 move, is going to be enough to get you in there and stun all the enemies. And when you do this, stunning every enemy when you kick open the door into a room is extremely powerful. And I'm always using this late in the scenario on the 3rd or 4th room or something along those lines. Knockout the Support is a great card. 20 initiative, very good for us. And then the top attack 3 is solid for level 1, although it peters out a little bit later. It does create Earth, which is super handy. And then it will also stop enemies from being healed. And you're going to love this in certain scenarios, I guarantee it. And then the bottom is what is really amazing about this card. Move 2 and then destroy an adjacent obstacle to strengthen. You're going to be able to do a ton with this card, because don't forget that strengthen lasts until the end of your next turn. So if you move first and then attack this turn, you're strengthened, and the next turn all your attacks are strengthened. And the demo's perk deck, the attack modifier deck, gets really good later on, especially because you can remove a ton of cards and add in +2s and that sort of stuff. And so strengthen is going to be amazing for you. You're never going to miss. Not never, but you're rarely going to miss. And it's going to do a ton of damage overall. It's going to add a ton of damage overall to all of your attacks. And you're going to love this card. Let's talk about a couple of allies that are really going to help you along on your journey, that are really going to make things a lot easier for you. The first in Jaws of the Lion is going to be the Void Warden. And the Void Warden can move enemies around a lot. And this is going to help you an absolute ton to make sure they're against walls, they're against obstacles, they're in groups, so you know they're adjacent to obstacles. And so if you're playing with less than 4 players, beg one of your friends to play the Void Warden, because you two are going to be a really good combo together. Next, if we're talking original Gloomhaven, the Cragheart. Cragheart can make obstacles, and this is going to help you use your Strengthen move, your Bless move, and you're going to have obstacles all over that can reroute enemies, and that you'll also be able to use to power yourself up. And so if you can play with a Cragheart, it's really going to maximize your effectiveness. And in the original Gloomhaven, there are scenarios that are really tough to play for the demo. And so if you've got a Cragheart with you, it's really going to smooth out some of those bumps. I hope you're liking this video. And if you are, please go ahead, hit that like button. It really helps me out a lot. And subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so that when I put out new content, it notifies you. Also, I've created another video. I think you're really going to like it. I've ranked all 22 of the Gloomhaven classes. This includes Forgotten Circles, and it includes Jaws of the Lion. So go ahead and see how the Demolitionist stacks up against the rest of the classes. And go take a look, see how your other favorite classes stack up against the rest of the Gloomhaven universe. The big one. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like there's a little bit less experience being doled out in Jaws of the Lion versus original Gloomhaven. Go ahead, comment below. Let me know if you agree with that or not. I don't know. I haven't done any scientific research, but it just feels like there's less experience so that it manages, the campaign length compared to how much experience you're getting. So you're not, leveled up halfway through or something. Anyways, so the big one is a pretty good card. It's a very good card, actually. The top is a pretty good action. It's going to hit a lot of enemies. It's going to produce some elements for us. Make sure, save it till the end, because the demo has such low stamina with 9 cards. You got to be pretty careful about which cards you lose. But the bottom of this card is awesome. Move 3 and destroy 1 adjacent obstacle is going to be really, really good for us. Between Knockout the Support and this, you should be moving and destroying obstacles as much as you possibly can so that you're powering up your attack modifier deck. And make sure that when you do cast the big one, the top, at near to the end of the scenario, that you are strengthened. It's really going to help push up the total damage output. Explode. The top is a very good late scenario kind of move to stun everybody and do some crowd control. If you do have a Void Warden, make sure you coordinate to have them, position the monsters adjacent to the obstacle. And then you can do some pretty good work with this, suffering damage and stunning, especially against shielded enemies. It's going to work pretty well. And then the bottom's a great move. Add fire and it's 6 move. That's going to get you anywhere you need to go. 1-2 Punch is one of my favorite level 1 cards, maybe my favorite, and for a couple of different reasons. So the top, if somebody's poisoned, it's 5 damage. If you use the bottom of level, it's 5 damage. There's a bunch of different ways you can power up this card, and I like the multi-attacks. And if you attack the same enemy twice, now you're shoving that enemy away. So if it's a melee enemy and they didn't have move and they just had some big attack, you're pushing them out of attack range, which is helpful. And then push is, of course, very helpful to us. Shove them towards a wall if you can, so you can set up next turn for a wall attack or something along those lines. And then the bottom of this can do really good burst damage. Not really good. It can help you do really good damage by giving you a little extra burst by having that bottom attack. And then it's nice. Kill the enemy, loot, get some loot. Really good for that. Love this card. Definitely taking it with me, especially early on. Implode. Top works well. Play knockout the support, so you have Earth. Then next turn, you play an Implode, and you can, do extra damage from that. I like muddling enemies, giving them disadvantages, probably close to about shield 1 on average, can be really helpful for you. The move 3 bottom, destroy 1 obstacle within range 3. That's going to combo nicely with Rubble. So you can move, and destroy an object. And this is a really good synergy play. It allows you to keep good flow. You get to move, you get to destroy an obstacle, and you get to do a top attack. So I think Implode most of the time I'm using it for the bottom. And then next turn I'm playing it with Rubble. And just make sure you're watching really closely where the monsters are going to be so that they can be around that destruction token for your next turn Rubble play. Rubble. A not bad card. At level 1, it's decent, but it looks better than it is. It's fairly tough to use, especially if you don't have a Void Warden. Void Warden can help you a lot with this, but it's pretty tough to use. Still good, produces Earth for some of our other cards. The bottom move to create a 2 damage trap in adjacent. I don't know. This is very rarely going to be useful. A 2 damage trap. If it was a 4 damage trap, at least you could place it and then make moves around it, but you're never making a move around a 2 damage trap, and I think you're rarely going to use this one. Rubble, however, gets a lot better once we get our level 4 card Remote Detonation. So once we get to level 4, we'll talk about those 2 combos and how we can really do some good damage with that if we can get enemies adjacent to an obstacle. Level. Top is what I would call a sideboard situation. So go ahead, read the special rules. If you've got objectives, things like that, you're definitely going to take level with you. It's going to be one of your best cards, especially at early levels. And then the bottom, it's pretty good. If you're playing 1-2 Punch, it turns it from 3 to 5 damage. And then anytime you're attacking with a multi, attack action, it's going to add, 2 damage plus. And so it's a pretty good card. I take it with me most of the time, but if there's an objective, I'm 100% taking it. Lobbed Charge. Top, it's going to be better for you in Jaws of the Lion than original Gloomhaven because of, no flying enemies, so everyone gets to go through the trap. It's going to be quite effective for you against heavily shielded enemies, and so it's a decent card. I like to go late with it, throw the trap, and then next turn you've got fire up. So you consume fire with Piston Punch, and then you punch them through the trap and up against a wall or through another trap or something along those lines. It can be decently effective. To me, it feels like those 2 cards were kind of meant to be used in combination with a late move with Lobbed Charge and an early Piston Punch. Although you're going to have to use a fast card with Piston Punch because it has 42 initiative. It would have made more sense if Piston Punch was, a nice quick initiative. But anyways, and then the bottom of Lobbed Charge, I don't know if you can play this loss. The big one is a better loss, and then Explosive Blitz is a better loss. That's already 2 losses. It's getting a little dicey to play a 3rd loss. If you do like to play this card, you should combo it with Windup though, and then do, you know, some crazy move for a potential, you know, move 8, attack 8, and push 2. If you can get 8 out of it, it's worth it. But if you're getting 4 or 5 out of this card for a loss, I don't think it's going to be worth it. Okay, pushing tactics so we can manipulate enemies. This is going to be critical in us maximizing, you know, how good the Demolitionist is. Because, you know, we need a lot of these conditions to be fulfilled to put out reasonable damage. Your 2 main early push attacks are Piston Punch and 1-2 Punch, and you should be using those a lot. I rarely leave home without these, especially at early levels, because you're going to be wanting to push enemies against walls and obstacles. And don't forget Gloomhaven vets. Push works differently in Jaws of the Lion. In Gloomhaven push 3, you have to push 3 unless they run into something. In Jaws of the Lion, you can determine how many you want to push. So if it's 3 push, you can push 1, 2, or 3, whichever is best, you know, whichever makes the most effective move. And then when pushing, make sure you have the correct angle. So a push doesn't have to be exactly in a straight line, but it does have to move the target further away on each one. So you can do kind of like a zigzag thing or whatever, but make sure that you've got the right angle so that every time you push, you're putting a monster against a wall or against an obstacle. If you can do that, you're going to do really good with the demo. And so what we want to do a lot of the time is we want to look at the monster's initiative, and depending on where they're going to move, we either want to go slow or fast, depending. And let me explain. So if a monster is right near a wall, you don't want it to move first and get away from that wall, where your push 2 is not going to put it against the wall. You want to go fast and move in and shove it up against the wall before it has a chance to move. If it's not currently in a position where your push is going to get it next to a wall or an obstacle, you can go late and then let it move and then push and assess the situation so that you've got a greater chance of shoving it up against a wall or an obstacle. Hopefully that helps you maximize your pushing abilities and gives you a little bit to think about when you're playing your turns so that you can make sure monsters are always going to be in the right positions for you. Monster focus and enemy movement are going to be key for you because you have all these conditions to fulfill. Yes, I know I'm a bit of a broken record, but if you really want to play the demo well, you're really going to need to pay a lot of attention. It's, you know, it's not as easy as playing somebody like the Hatchet or the Red Guard. It's much harder in my opinion. Anyway, so what you want to do is you want to be the person moving the monsters, because there's always, I shouldn't say always, lots of times there's an opportunity to move a monster in different hexes, even following the same rules. So you want to make sure that you're always keeping monsters close to walls, that you're paying attention to where obstacles are, and making sure that you move them closer to those things and not further away with the same amount of movement. So I would recommend that you take over moving the monsters for your group if you're the Demolitionist. And also traps. Traps are a really good way of manipulating where monsters go. And using a card like Remote Detonation and throwing 3 traps, you can really do a lot of cool things. So let's quickly head to the table and talk about exactly what you can do and how you can manipulate monster movement to your best advantage. Okay, let's take a look at how Remote Detonation can really help us. We're going to place 3 damage traps, and we're going to use it to really manipulate this room. This is just the first scenario, so no spoilers here, and it's not really, it's the setup, but you know, we're not starting in starting character positions, but this is just for example purposes. So we place 1 trap here. This is the first example. 1 trap here, and then we put 1 trap here. What this does is it's going to make this enemy, he's going to have to go all the way around. So that's going to effectively neutralize him for multiple turns, probably 2 or 3 turns. So that would be, you know, equivalent to a stun on this one here. And also this is going to make this enemy go all the way around here. And then this last trap here, it's going to make these guys take one more turn to get to you. So if they have 3 move, 1, 2, 3, normally this elite would be able to get you, but now 1, 2, 3, that elite's not going to be able to get to you. This is going to allow you to funnel the enemies around and buy you some time. Okay, in our next example, we're going to use it to repath the enemies down here below. And so we're going to put 2 traps here. And then we're going to put a trap here, because we're going to want to use it later with some pushing. And also, if this monster here has 1 movement, it's going to go here and not attack and not go into the trap. Make sure you do not put the trap here, because what you've done is you've stopped these guys from being able to path to you anywhere. So obstacles all along here blocked by the trap. So they'll just plow right through these traps. If you want to damage them, that's fine. But I think there's probably more overall value in using traps to really path enemies, because 1, 2, 3 normally for this elite to get to you, and now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's bought you at least 1 turn, potentially 2 turns. And so what we're going to do is, when these elites or when these monsters do come around, we can also move down in here. And let's say this guy moves here, then we can punch him into the trap with one of our 2 push cards, 1, 2 punch or piston punch. And then as these guys come down, we can reposition here. And let's say this guy's dead and this guy's moved around and he moves to here. Now you can punch with a 2 push into one of these traps. And effectively what you've done is you bought yourself a bunch of extra turns with these traps. And then you're going to start punching guys into them. So for advanced players, remote detonation can be pretty good. I don't necessarily recommend it for everyone, but if you really understand the rules, you can definitely do some good work with this card. And remember that elites go first and they move in standee order. Let's try and get that focused here. And so this elite at number 1 is always going to be the first to move. So remember that, because sometimes you can use that to your advantage, or it may be to your disadvantage, but still you got to move them in order on the standee. Hope that helps. At level 2, we've got Robotic Enhancement and we've got Crash Protocol. The top of Robotic Enhancement, a little bit weak at attack 2, but it's done. That's good. You can pair it with the bottom of Piston Punch if you're in a group of enemies and you're in a bit of trouble. Although it's only going to be initiative 33 at that, so make sure you're only using that against slow enemies. Otherwise, you're going to need to pair Robotic Enhancement or Piston Punch with a faster card to get that stun off before you get attacked. And then the bottom of Robotic Enhancement, the move 4, ignore difficult terrain. Very good, just solid utility there. And then Crash Protocol, the top, I don't think it's going to be worth a loss for you. You'd have to play it really early to make sure you get the 4 attacks against walls off. And it's still only going to be worth 8 damage for you. I think we've got better losses to play. And I think, with the demo, you're playing a couple losses max. And then the rest of the time you're playing non-loss cards so that you can actually make it through scenarios. And the bottom, I don't want to destroy a bunch of obstacles. I'd rather use the bottom of knock out the support or something along those lines so that I'm buffing myself up instead of just randomly destroying obstacles to add a little bit of move. I don't think you should be really doing that a lot. So I think this one's pretty straightforward. I'm taking Robotic Enhancement almost every single time. At level 3, we've got Firebombs and we've got Nowhere to Run. Firebomb's top is okay. It's middle of the pack. It's not strong. It's not weak. It does produce fire. It's got pretty good range. So utility wise, it's going to help us when when we're not in melee range. Initiative 24, also fairly decent. The move 2 and destroy an obstacle for adjacent monsters to suffer 2 damage is going to do some okay work for us. So overall, a relatively solid card. Nowhere to Run does good burst damage. The easiest way to use this card is to push a monster into a corner where you're automatically going to get 4 adjacent wall hexes. And this is going to make it really easy for you to do, 8 to 10 damage depending on whether you can fill the other two sides of the hex with an ally, yourself, whatever. And so you're going to be able to do some good damage with this. You're pretty much getting 9 damage plus every time you do this when you do shove them into a wall. And then the move 3, move 1 adjacent trap to an empty hex near you is just, a decent move with an okay ability, and it does produce earth, and earth is going to help us as well. I think I'm taking Nowhere to Run more often than I'm taking Fire Bombs, just for that good strong burst damage, but you can take either at this level. At level 4, we've got Remote Detonation, and we've got Extra Fuel. So let's talk Remote Detonation first. This combos well with Rubble. You go, you destroy an obstacle, you do an attack, and then next turn, you use Rubble to do another attack based upon the destruction token. So those two combos can do pretty good work. Just, you got to make sure you've got at least 2 enemies adjacent to the obstacle when you play Remote Detonation. And then the bottom, as I showed you in the example before, it can be really good for positioning enemies. You can also line them up and, shove somebody through 3 traps with Piston Punch or something along those lines. So against, a heavily shielded enemy that's giving you some problems, you could potentially use it for that. But really, I use it more for manipulating monster movement so that they're going to be against walls, or they're going to path around and take extra turns to get to us, stuff like that. And then our other level 4 card, Extra Fuel. Top is just a very solid attack. I mean, it's just a straight upgrade to the top of Crushing Weight. We add a wound. We also make fire, which is going to be helpful. And then the bottom move 5 is very good. And you can actually add an attack 1 if you consume fire. So that's going to allow us to move and attack with a bottom. That's pretty nice. 17 initiative, very good as well for us. So I think I'm taking Extra Fuel more of the time, even though we talked a lot about how Remote Detonation can, manipulate enemies and stuff like that. I think Extra Fuel is going to be just a little bit more solid. Although if you're an advanced player, taking Remote Detonation and using those traps and using the top can probably actually output more damage than Extra Fuel. So based upon that, it's up to you. Okay, we're at level 5. There are spoilers here now, so if you don't want to continue, I'm going to give you a second just to hit pause and, go to somewhere else. Watch another one of my videos. Don't go to somebody else's videos. Okay, at level 5, we've got Mech Suit. Mech Suit is a really good card. I like to use it. I like to play really aggressive in the beginning with the demo once I've got this card. And then once I get down 10 hit points, I heal up, throw the Mech Suit on, and I've got Shield 1. And so in the first half of the scenario, use it for move 2, loot 1, hoover up some loot, and then mid scenario, heal up, get that shield, become a little bit more tanky. Very, very good card. I mean, you don't have to take it at level 5. You could go back and take a level 4 card if it works for your build, but I think most of the time I'm taking Mech Suit. At level 6, we've got Drill Fist, and we've got Dust Cloud. Dust Cloud, attack 2, target all adjacent enemies, push 1, muddle. Just a bit too weak for me, and pushing enemies out of range can be a bit problematic for us. I'd rather keep them closer. Push 1 is not very often enough to, get them adjacent to what you need. And there's not a lot of flexibility there. It does produce Earth, that's nice. Initiative is really nice at 15 too. And then the move 2, destroy 1 adjacent obstacle and get shield 2. This combined with Mech Suit can actually make us really tanky, so in certain situations it can be quite good. But I still think I'd rather destroy an obstacle and strengthen or bless or do 2 damage or something most of the time. And then Drill Fist. Drill Fist is a really, really good card. If you play level, you're adding 3 damage to this card because it's 3 attacks. You play the bottom of level. So we've got attack 2, attack 2, attack 3 with level, and then ignore shield on the last attack, and it's just on the last attack, and then poison. And then next turn you play like Wholesale Destruction. You're going to be able to take out any enemy in 2 turns with non-loss cards. It's going to be really powerful for you. And because the demo has such a good attack modifier deck, having more attacks is really good, especially because you do get to ignore some of the shield on this one. And then the bottom of Drill Fist, also very good against a tough shielded elite. Go in, make sure that everybody's attacks ignore shield, and then you're going to be able to really work some good shielded enemies over. This is very effective against original Gloomhaven shielded enemies, where they're sometimes very high shield, low hit points, and it's also very good in Jaws of the Lion. I'm taking Drill Fist pretty much 100% of the time. At level 7, we have Insult to Injury, and we have Micro Missiles. Insult to Injury looks better than it is, especially the top, and the bottom too, to a certain extent. But the top, the problem is that you're going to waste some of this damage. So it is not worth 9 damage. You're almost always going to waste some of this damage because it's on attacks targeting enemies you already have attacked, and so they're going to be weaker and closer to death. And let's just take Wholesale Destruction as an example. So it's going to be attack 2, then it's going to be attack 5, then it's going to be move 2, then it's going to be attack 6. You can very easily waste a couple points of damage. So I would bet that on average, Insult to Injury is actually only worth 7 extra damage. So I don't really think it's worth it. And the bottom is pretty decent though. Move 4, add Immobilize to all your attacks. You know, there's some good functionality in that. And then also Muddle, you know, that can be pretty good. So, you know, I actually think the bottom's better than the top. Yeah. Micro Missiles. Top is actually pretty good. Yeah, it's only attack 2, but it hits 4 targets. So in those big rooms when you're getting overwhelmed, you're going to be able to output some serious damage. And once you're getting to this high level, the attack modifier deck of the demo is going to be very good. So you're adding +1 or +2 to every one of these attacks, and you can easily get up to 12 plus damage with one shot of this total. And then the bottom move 2, all objectives within range 3 suffer 3 damage. You're going to love this card on an objective mission scenario. And, you know, it's definitely going to be worth it. And you can use either one of these. So it's not like you have to sideboard it for missions that don't have objectives. So I'm taking Micro Missiles pretty much every time at this level. At level 8, we've got Gut Punch, and we've got the bigger one. Gut Punch, very strong card for the demo. You can easily make Earth and Fire, and an attack 7 push to Immobilize is a very, very strong non-loss ability because any melee enemy is effectively stunned, at least from attacking, right? And they can still heal and do other stuff. But when you push them away and you immobilize them, that means they can't get to you, and that's really, really good. And then the bottom attack 3 stun is also very good for a bottom action, stunning and doing 3 damage. It's going to allow you to stun and do burst damage with that attack 3, so good. 26 initiative, not bad as well. The bigger one, it can do a lot, but I don't love it, and here's why. So the big one doesn't do damage to your allies, and it doesn't destroy obstacles. And yeah, the bigger one has, you know, a huge kind of, you know, area of effect compared to the big one, so it's easier to hit more enemies, but it's also easier to hit your friends too. And so it is better than the big one, but I still don't know if it's better than taking Gut Punch. In fact, I don't believe it is better. At level 8, I'm taking Gut Punch almost every single time, even though the bigger one can do all that damage. And then also, I guess I have to talk about the bottom of the bigger one too. It's move 3, and then all adjacent enemies that are adjacent to a wall suffer damage. This can be pretty decent as well, but I still think that Gut Punch is just so much easier to use, and over a scenario, you're going to do a lot better with Gut Punch over the bigger one. Go Gut Punch! At level 9, we've got Wholesale Destruction, and we've got Collateral Damage. So let's talk Collateral Damage first. I don't think the top is strong enough for a level 9. It can be useful, you can output a reasonable amount of damage, but it's a loss, and I just don't think it's going to be worth it at level 9. I'm tipping my hand here. Clearly I like Wholesale Destruction more, but okay, so Initiative 15 though is very good. Move 2, destroy 1 adjacent obstacle. If you do, gain 1, and all enemies in the same room suffer 2 damage. This can actually be quite good. You can output some pretty decent damage with this, but still not amazing for level 9. Wholesale Destruction, on the other hand, is a fantastic card. You play the bottom of level with this. You're doing attack 3, move 2, attack 4, add fire to it. That's a +1 attack and wound. That's 12 damage. You know, non-loss, repeatable, etc., etc. You get where I'm going with this. Very powerful, really, really good. And then the bottom is also amazing, and it's a persistent effect. but it's not a loss persistent effect. So you're going to put this down and play it. And if you want to pick it up to use the top later in the scenario when you've got a big room of enemies, you can. It's not a loss, and you're going to get 2 XP every time. And it's going to make it super simple for you to strengthen yourself, to bless yourself, to do all these things, because all of these cards rely upon obstacles, and you're basically going to have an obstacle there 100% of the time without having to worry about positioning. So it's also going to make your life super simple. And one thing you can do too is you can make yourself super tanky if you've decided to go this way, and you're gonna have to plan ahead though, because you're gonna have to make some card choices earlier on that are gonna change it. So at level 6, if you take Dust Cloud and you've got Mech Suit, you are gonna be able to shield up 3 a lot, because you're not gonna have to worry about destroying an obstacle to get that shield 2 from the bottom of Dust Cloud. And so you can actually become very, very tanky. Every single time, without a doubt, I'm taking Wholesale Destruction. Okay, let's talk enhancements. This is for original Gloomhaven. You can't enhance in Jaws of the Lion, but I threw this in just because I think a lot of people are trying to port their characters over from Jaws of the Lion into Gloomhaven. But if you could, before that, go ahead, please hit that like button. It really helps me out a lot. And subscribe to my channel so that when I put out new content, you can take a look at it. So, enhancements, the first one, Piston Punch. Cheaply, we can just add +1 to push. This is going to do a ton of work for us to get monsters into traps, to get them against walls, to push melee monsters out of attack range. Super, super useful, very cheap. Go with that one. And then knock out the support. Enhance the move +1 on the bottom so that you can move 3 and strengthen. It's going to help you get to obstacles easier. It's going to help you a lot with positioning and utility wise. It's really going to make a big difference for you. Okay, for perks, we're going to start out the way I always do, and that's to remove all of the -1s. -1s, they ruin lives. They always ruin your plan, so get rid of them first so that you can rely on your attack modifier deck to do 4 damage when you need it, or 5 damage, or whatever, and not, do 1 less and leave the enemy with 1 hit point. Next, remove the -2 and the +1. And you're actually removing these 2 cards. You're not removing a -2 and adding a +1. Saw some confusion online around that. And then replace the +0 with the +2 muddle. Straight upgrade, love muddling. And then add in your +2s. And then add in the replace +1 with the +2 element cards, depending on whether you want fire or earth, up to you. All right, just briefly, a few item recommendations. Anything that pushes or pulls is going to help you a lot to position enemies, and it's going to be worth its weight in gold. And then definitely get the boots so you can add that +1 move to, cards like knock out the support bottom or the big one bottom, so that you can really get to obstacles and get those strengthen and blesses. It's really going to help you out a lot. And, adding strengthen and bless is just really going to push your damage output up. I hope this guide has helped you play the Demolitionist. If it has, please make sure and comment below. Tell me your stories, your thoughts, everything like that. And thank you so much for watching the video.